The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and desperation when Jack Morrison heard the words that would change everything. "I'm not equipped to raise someone else's child." A stepmother's voice, cold as the February wind rattling the windows. Through the doorway of room 314, he saw her, 8 years old, hollow-eyed, abandoned over a medical bill that might as well have been a death sentence. $47,000, the price of a child's life, apparently. Jack's hand went to his wallet, heavy with cash meant for a motorcycle repair. His daughter Kelly had been dead 8 years. This wasn't her. This was a stranger. But those eyes, God, those eyes that had already seen too much, they were looking right through him, asking a question he couldn't ignore. Would he be the man who walked away, or the one who finally balanced the scales? The fluorescent lights of Cook County Hospital's pediatric wing hummed with their familiar electric drone, casting everything in that sterile bluish glow that made even the cheerful animal murals on the walls look ghostly. It was the 3rd week of February, and outside the tall windows, Chicago was locked in one of those brutal cold snaps that made the bones ache just thinking about stepping outdoors. The thermometer had been hovering around 8 degrees for days, and the wind came howling off Lake Michigan like it had a personal grudge against anyone foolish enough to be caught outside. Harper Mitchell sat in the hospital bed, her small frame nearly swallowed by the white sheets and thin blankets. At 8 years old, she should have been in 3rd grade, worrying about spelling tests and playground politics. Instead, she'd spent the last 11 days in this room, recovering from emergency surgery after her appendix had ruptured. The doctors said she'd been hours away from sepsis when they'd finally gotten her into the operating room. Hours away from death. She didn't look like a child who'd just dodged mortality. Her brown hair, usually kept in neat braids by her late father, hung limp and unbrushed around her pale face. Her eyes, the same warm hazel her father had possessed, stared at the muted television mounted on the wall. But she wasn't really watching the cartoon that flickered across the screen. She was listening to the voices in the hallway, voices that had been getting louder and sharper for the past 20 minutes. "Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but we need to discuss the financial arrangements before discharge." That was Mr. Patterson, the hospital's billing administrator. Harper had seen him twice before, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, who always carried a leather portfolio under his arm like it contained state secrets. "I've told you 3 times already, I don't have that kind of money." That was Diane. Not Mom, or even Diane, her stepmother. Just Diane, the woman her father had married 18 months before the heart attack took him last October. The woman who'd looked at Harper like an inconvenient piece of furniture ever since the funeral. $47,000. That's insane. For what? Some stomach surgery? "It was a ruptured appendix with complications, Mrs. Mitchell. Your stepdaughter required emergency intervention, 2 additional procedures to address the infection, and extensive antibiotic treatment. The itemized bill breaks down. I don't care what it breaks down to. I'm not paying it." Harper pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The room suddenly felt colder, though the thermostat still read 72 degrees. She'd learned, in the 5 months since her father died, to read the temperature in Diane's voice. This was the ice-cold tone, the one that came right before something bad happened, like when Diane had donated all of Harper's father's belongings to Goodwill without asking, like when she'd cancelled Harper's piano lessons because they were an unnecessary expense, like when she'd told Harper that things were going to change around here the day after the funeral. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need to be clear about something." Mr. Patterson's voice had taken on a different quality now, firmer, with an edge of disbelief. "Are you saying you're refusing to pay for your stepdaughter's medical care?" "I'm saying I can't afford it. There's a difference. The hospital has payment plans, financial assistance programs, which I don't qualify for because my husband had a life insurance policy. You know what that policy paid out? Barely enough to cover the funeral and 6 months of mortgage payments. I'm a waitress at a diner, Mr. Patterson. I make $22,000 a year. You're asking me to pay double my annual salary for a kid who isn't even mine." Harper closed her eyes. There it was. The truth that had been hanging in the air of their small house in Bridgeport for 5 months, finally spoken out loud in a hospital hallway where anyone could hear. A kid who isn't even mine. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, had been a good man. Everyone said so at the funeral. A machinist at the Ford plant in Chicago Heights, union member for 23 years. The kind of guy who helped neighbors fix their cars and never asked for anything in return. He'd raised Harper alone after her mother died, when Harper was 2, cancer, quick and cruel. He'd been both parents, attending every school function, teaching her to ride a bike in Palmisano Park, reading to her every night before bed. Then he'd met Diane at the diner where she worked. Harper remembered the first time he'd brought her home for dinner, how nervous he'd been, how he'd asked Harper if it was okay. Harper had said yes, because her father had looked happy for the first time in years. She'd wanted him to be happy. The wedding had been small, just the 3 of them and a justice of the peace at City Hall. Diane had been pleasant enough in those early months, though Harper noticed she never quite looked at her directly, never asked about her day at school, never offered to help with homework, but she'd made her father smile, and that had been enough. Then the heart attack, sudden, massive, fatal. Thomas Mitchell had been 42 years old. He'd collapsed in the garage on a Sunday afternoon while changing the oil in his truck. Diane had been at work. Harper had been the one to find him, had called 911, had performed the CPR she'd learned in a school assembly, had tried and tried and tried until the paramedics arrived and gently pulled her away from her father's lifeless body. The therapy sessions afterward had helped with the nightmares, but nothing could fill the hole his absence had left. And Diane, rather than drawing closer to Harper in their shared grief, had pulled away like water-repelling oil. "I'm not equipped to raise someone else's child," Diane was saying now, her voice carrying clearly through the partially open door. "I married Tom. I didn't sign up for this. Mrs. Mitchell, she's 8 years old. She has no one else. She has a grandmother in Florida. Tom's mother. Let her deal with it. Your stepdaughter just had major surgery. She needs—" "I know what she needs. She needs someone who can afford her. That's not me." The sound of heels clicking on linoleum, getting farther away. Harper opened her eyes and watched the doorway. Some small, stupid part of her, hoping Diane would appear, would say this was all a misunderstanding, would sit on the edge of the bed and smooth her hair like Harper's father used to do. But it was only Mr. Patterson who appeared in the doorway, his face ashen, his leather portfolio hanging forgotten from one hand. He looked at Harper, opened his mouth, closed it again. What do you say to a child whose stepmother just abandoned her in a hospital hallway over money? "Harper," he finally managed, I need to make some phone calls, okay? You stay here and rest." He disappeared before she could respond. Harper listened to his footsteps retreat down the hallway, then the ding of the elevator, then nothing but the mechanical hum of the hospital and the distant beep of monitoring equipment from other rooms. She looked at the small bag on the chair beside her bed. The clothes Diane had brought 3 days ago, sweatpants and a hoodie, both clean but worn. Her father's watch, the one with the cracked crystal that he'd refused to replace because it had been a gift from his own father. A paperback copy of The Secret Garden that Harper had been reading before the pain had started, back when her biggest worry had been whether she'd finish it before the school book report was due. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Some other Harper, in some other world where fathers didn't die and stepmothers didn't leave you in hospitals because you cost too much. Outside the window, snow had started to fall. Big, lazy flakes that drifted down through the streetlights and caught on the window ledge. Chicago in February. Her father used to say the cold was God's way of testing whether you really wanted to live here. "We're tough," he'd tell her, bundling her up in her winter coat before walking her to the bus stop. Us Mitchells, we don't run from the cold. We stand in it and we endure. Harper pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them and watched the snow fall. Enduring seemed to be all she had left. Down in the hospital's main lobby, 3 floors below Harper's room, the automatic doors hissed open and a gust of frigid air swept in, along with 4 men who looked like they'd ridden in on the storm itself. They were bikers. That much was obvious. Heavy leather jackets despite the cold, patches and insignia that marked them as members of the Hells Angels motorcycle club. The oldest of them, a man in his early 60s with iron-grey hair pulled back in a ponytail and a beard that would have done a Civil War general proud, led the way. His boots left melting snow prints on the tile floor. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, old and pale, the kind of scar that came with a story people didn't ask about twice. His name was Jack Morrison, though anyone who'd been in Chicago's motorcycle community for more than a month knew him as Ironside. Not because he was inflexible or harsh, but because 23 years ago a drunk driver had hit him head-on while he was riding his Harley down I-55, and he'd walked away with nothing but bruises while his bike had been twisted into scrap metal. Ironside, the man who couldn't be broken. The 3 men with him, Bobby Wrench Garcia, Tommy Ratchet O'Connell, and Mike Preacher Williams, flanked him like an honor guard. They weren't here for medical treatment. They were here because one of their own, a prospect named Danny Kowalski, was upstairs recovering from a broken leg suffered in a slide-out on black ice 2 weeks ago. "Second floor, East Wing," Wrench said, checking his phone. "Danny says the nurses are nice, but the food's garbage." "Hospital food's always garbage," Ratchet muttered. "My old man spent his last month in one of these places. Tried to feed him something they called meatloaf. Looked like someone had already eaten it once." They headed for the elevators, drawing stares from visitors and staff alike. Jack Morrison was used to the looks, used to the way people's hands moved toward their children, as if proximity to a biker might somehow contaminate the innocent. Used to the whispered conversations, the assumptions, the fear. Let them assume, let them fear. He'd stopped trying to explain himself decades ago. The elevator arrived and they stepped in. As the doors began to close, Jack heard it. A woman's voice, sharp and defensive, coming from somewhere near the administrative offices. "I'm not equipped to raise someone else's child." The words hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. His hand shot out, stopping the elevator doors from closing. "Jack!" Wrench looked at him with concern. "You okay?" Jack Morrison stepped out of the elevator, following that voice like a bloodhound on a scent. His brothers followed without question. That was the code. That was the bond. They found the scene in the hallway outside the billing office. A thin woman in a waitress uniform and winter coat, her face pinched with irritation. A man in a suit holding a leather portfolio, his expression somewhere between professional concern and poorly disguised disgust. And through an open doorway behind them, visible in a hospital room, a small figure in a bed. A little girl with brown hair and hollow eyes, watching it all unfold. "Ma'am, please reconsider," the man in the suit was saying. "We can work something out. Payment plans, charity care provisions." "I've made my decision," the woman interrupted. "I'm leaving. The state can figure out what to do with her. That's their job, not mine." She turned and nearly walked straight into Jack Morrison's chest. She stopped, looked up at the 6'3" biker blocking her path. Whatever she saw in his face made her take a step back. "Excuse me," she said, trying to step around him. Jack didn't move. "What's the debt?" The woman blinked. "What?" "The hospital bill." "How much?" "That's none of your business." Jack looked past her at the man in the suit. "How much?" Mr. Patterson clutched his portfolio. "Sir, I can't discuss patient financial information with—" $47,000, the woman said impatiently. $47,000 for a kid who isn't even mine. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "No." The single word stopped her cold. Jack Morrison looked at this woman, this stepmother who could walk away from a child recovering from surgery in a Chicago hospital in February, and felt something shift deep in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 8 years, suddenly cracking under pressure. "I'll pay it," he said. The hallway went silent except for the background noise of the hospital, monitors beeping, phones ringing, the elevator dinging somewhere down the corridor. "You'll what?" Diane said. "I'll pay the 47,000, all of it." Jack looked at Mr. Patterson. "You take cash?" Mr. Patterson's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, a gesture Jack recognized from his years of negotiating with nervous people. The billing administrator looked at Jack Morrison the way someone might look at a mirage in the desert, visible but impossible to believe. "Sir, That's a very generous offer, but I need to understand the situation here." Patterson's eyes darted between Jack, the 3 other bikers flanking him, and Diane, who stood frozen in the hallway with her mouth slightly open. "Are you a family member? A friend of the family?" "Never seen this kid before in my life," Jack said flatly. "Don't need to. Heard enough out here to know what's happening. You got a child up in that room who needs someone to step up. I'm stepping up." Diane found her voice. "You can't be serious. You're just going to pay $47,000 for some stranger's kid." Jack turned his gaze on her, and she actually took a half-step back. His eyes were the color of steel, and they held the weight of hard years and harder choices. "Got a problem with that?" No, I just..." "Why?" "Because she's 8 years old and alone in a hospital bed, and you're walking away like she's a bill you forgot to pay." Jack's voice remained level, but there was flint underneath. "Someone's got to balance the scales." Wrench stepped forward, pulling a worn leather wallet from his jacket. "Boss, you want us to make a run to the safe house? Grab what you need." "No." Jack kept his eyes on Patterson. "I got what I need. My truck's parked in the garage. Give me 20 minutes. Patterson cleared his throat. "Sir, even if you're serious about this, and I'm not entirely sure you are, there are legal considerations. The child's custody, her guardianship status, the fact that you're a complete stranger." "One problem at a time," Jack interrupted. "Right now, the problem is the money. You want it or not?" Yes, of course, but..." "Then let's go to your office and do the paperwork." Diane stepped forward, something calculating flickering across her face. "Wait. If he's paying the bill, what happens to my legal obligation? Am I still liable?" Patterson looked at her with barely concealed contempt. "If Mr. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Morrison. Jack Morrison. If Mr. Morrison pays the full amount owed, your financial obligation would be satisfied. However, you're still Harper's legal guardian. The medical debt and custody are separate issues. Then I want to terminate my guardianship right now. Whatever paperwork needs to happen, let's do it." The hallway seemed to grow colder. Jack Morrison had seen a lot in his 62 years. He'd done 3 tours in Vietnam, seen friends die in rice paddies and mountain passes. He'd spent time in prison for assault, back when he was younger and angrier and hadn't learned to control the rage that combat had planted in him. He'd buried his wife 35 years ago, lost his daughter 8 years back, and spent most of his life navigating a world that viewed him as a criminal simply because of the patch on his jacket. But this casual cruelty, this willingness to discard a grieving child like unwanted furniture, ignited something in him that he'd thought had died along with his own family. "You'll never see her again," Jack said quietly. It wasn't a question. Diane met his eyes for a half-second, then looked away. "That's probably for the best, for both of us." "You should leave," Preacher said from behind Jack. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but carried an undercurrent of warning. Preacher had gotten his nickname not from any religious calling, but from his habit of delivering quiet sermons to people who needed to hear hard truths. Before someone says something that can't be taken back, Diane hitched her purse higher on her shoulder and walked past them without another word, her heels clicking rapidly on the linoleum floor. They watched her disappear around the corner toward the elevators. None of them spoke until the elevator dinged and the doors closed. "Lord have mercy," Preacher said softly. "That woman's got a heart like a frozen fuel line." Patterson seemed to shake himself out of a trance. "Mr. Morrison, I need to be completely transparent with you. Even if you pay this bill, and I'm still not entirely convinced you can, the child welfare system will need to be involved. Harper Mitchell is a minor without legal guardianship. The state will—" "I know what the state will do," Jack said. "I know how the system works, but first things first. The girl gets cleared medically, right? The only thing keeping her here is the money." "Well, yes, but then let's handle the money. Everything else comes after." Jack turned to Wrench. "You, Ratchet, go up and sit with Danny. Tell him I'll be up in an hour." "What about me, boss?" Preacher asked. "You're with me. Need a witness for this." Jack looked back at Patterson. "Lead the way." The billing administrator's office was a small, cluttered space that smelled of old coffee and printer toner. Patterson sat behind his desk, while Jack and Preacher took the two chairs opposite. The window behind Patterson looked out over the parking garage, where snow continued to fall in the glow of sodium lights. "I need to ask you some questions, Mr. Morrison," Patterson said, pulling up something on his computer. "Standard procedure for large payments. The hospital has to report cash transactions over $10,000 to the IRS, and—" "I know about the reporting requirements," Jack said. "I'm not hiding anything. The money's clean." "How did you come to have $47,000 in cash available on a Friday evening?" Jack leaned back in the chair, his leather jacket creaking. "I own 3 businesses in Chicago. A motorcycle repair shop in Pilsen, a bar in Bridgeport, and I'm half owner of a custom paint shop in back of the yards. All legitimate, all properly licensed, all paying taxes. I keep operating capital on hand for emergencies. This qualifies." Patterson typed something. "And your organization?" "The Hells Angels? We're a motorcycle club, Mr. Patterson. We ride together, we support each other, we do charity work. Yeah, we've got a reputation. Some of it's earned, most of it's not. But what we're not is a criminal enterprise, at least not my chapter. We got lawyers who will be happy to explain that, if you need clarification." Preacher spoke up. "We do a toy drive every Christmas, Thanksgiving meals for homeless veterans. Last year we raised $15,000 for the children's cancer ward at St. Jude's. You can look it up." Patterson held up his hands. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I just need to document the source of funds. It's hospital policy." "Document whatever you need," Jack said. "Now about getting that money here." His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted slightly. "Hold on." He stood and walked to the window, phone to his ear. "Yeah. No, I'm at Cook County Hospital, because I'm about to do something either really good or really stupid. Haven't decided which yet. Danny's fine. That's not why I'm here. Look, I need you to do something for me." Preacher watched Jack's back, the set of his shoulders, the way his free hand rubbed at his sternum, like something hurt there. Preacher had known Jack Morrison for 18 years, had been there the day Jack's daughter Kelly was buried, had watched this strong, proud man break down in a funeral home parking lot and scream at God for taking his little girl. He'd watched Jack rebuild himself over the years, throwing his pain into the club, into his businesses, into anything that kept him moving forward instead of drowning in grief. And now, here he was, about to spend a fortune on another little girl, one who reminded him of what he'd lost. Jack ended the call and turned back. "All right. My business partner's meeting me in the garage in 15 minutes with the cash. You got paperwork for me to sign?" Patterson pulled up a form on his computer. Several documents, actually. Payment agreement, receipt, a statement regarding the source of funds, and... He hesitated. "Mr. Morrison, I have to ask. What's your intention regarding the child? Harper. My intention is to make sure she's not abandoned in a hospital bed because nobody gives a damn. But practically speaking, what happens after the bill is paid? She can't stay here indefinitely. The state will place her in emergency foster care probably by Monday. The system isn't great, Mr. Morrison. She'll likely be bounced around homes, might not end up somewhere good. I know how foster care works, Jack said quietly. I was in it myself, from age 12 to 17. Group homes mostly, some decent, most not. Patterson's expression shifted to something like understanding. Then you know what she's facing. Yeah, I know. Jack sat back down heavily. But I can't just take custody of a kid, Patterson. I'm a 62-year-old biker with a criminal record from the 70s. No judge in Cook County's giving me guardianship of an 8-year-old girl I met 2 minutes ago. Probably not immediately, Patterson agreed. But if you're serious about helping her, there are steps you could take. Become a licensed foster parent, file for guardianship, demonstrate stability. How long would that take? Months. Maybe a year, depending on the background checks and home studies. Preacher leaned forward. Jack, you thinking what I think you're thinking? Jack didn't answer directly. He looked at Patterson. While all that's getting sorted, where does Harper go? Emergency foster placement. I'll have to call DCFS once her stepmother formally abandons guardianship. They'll send someone, probably by tomorrow morning. And she'll go to strangers. Yes. People who might not give a damn about her. It's unpredictable. The system's overloaded. She might get lucky, might not. Jack stood again, walked to the window, stared out at the snow and the parking garage and the dark city beyond. Somewhere in this building was a little girl who'd lost her father, been abandoned by her stepmother, and was about to be fed into a system that would treat her like a problem to be processed, rather than a child to be loved. 8 years ago, his daughter Kelly had been driving home from college for Thanksgiving break. A semi-truck with bad brakes had run a red light on Route 57. She'd been 23 years old, studying to be a teacher, full of life and light and promise. The state trooper who'd come to Jack's door had been kind, but firm. She didn't suffer. It was instant. As if that made it better. As if instant death was a mercy compared to the years of watching your child grow, learn, love, live. He'd spent 8 years wondering what the point of anything was if the good people died young and the cruel ones walked away unpunished. 8 years asking why he got to keep breathing when Kelly didn't. 8 years searching for some kind of meaning or purpose or justice in a world that seemed fundamentally unfair. And now, here was Harper Mitchell, 8 years old, abandoned in a hospital bed, and maybe, just maybe, this was the answer he'd been looking for. Not replacement. You couldn't replace a lost child, but purpose, a way to balance the scales. A way to make sure one little girl didn't go through what he went through, didn't feel what he felt when the universe took everything and offered nothing in return. Let me see her, Jack said, turning from the window. Before I do anything else, let me talk to the kid. Patterson looked uncertain. I'm not sure that's appropriate. She doesn't know you, and given the emotional state she's likely in. Then come with me. Stand in the doorway. But I need to look her in the eye before I make this decision. Jack's voice was firm. I'm about to change both our lives. She deserves to know who's doing it. Preacher stood. I'll go get the money from Tony. Meet you upstairs. Jack nodded. 3rd floor, Pediatric East Wing. Patterson saved his documents and stood. All right. But we keep this brief, and if she's distressed, we leave immediately. They took the elevator in silence. Jack Morrison felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders like physical mass. His phone buzzed again, probably Wrench, checking in, but he ignored it. His heart was pounding in a way it hadn't since Vietnam, since the night patrols when you knew contact was possible but not certain, when every shadow could be enemy or nothing. The elevator dinged. Third floor, pediatric East Wing. Room 314, Patterson said, leading the way. Jack followed, his boots silent on the linoleum now, his breathing steady. He'd faced enemy soldiers, hostile cops, rival bikers, and the crushing grief of loss. He'd survived it all, endured it all, kept moving forward even when forward seemed like it led nowhere. But walking toward room 314 to meet an 8-year-old girl named Harper Mitchell felt like the most dangerous thing he'd done in years. Because if he walked in that room and saw his daughter's eyes looking back at him from another child's face, he was done for. If he saw Kelly and Harper, even for a second, he'd move heaven and earth to protect this kid, and moving heaven and earth took more than money. It took commitment, it took sacrifice, it took opening up wounds that had barely scarred over. Patterson stopped outside 314. Through the partially open door, Jack could see the end of a hospital bed, a small figure huddled under white blankets, staring at a muted television. "Harper," Patterson called softly. "There's someone here who'd like to meet you. Is that okay?" A pause. Then a small voice, wary and tired. "Okay." Jack Morrison took a breath, sent up a prayer to a God he wasn't sure believed in him anymore, and walked through the doorway to meet his second chance at redemption. The first thing Jack noticed was how small she looked. Not just young small, but diminished, as if grief and abandonment had physically compressed her. Harper Mitchell sat propped up against thin hospital pillows, her brown hair tangled, her hazel eyes too old for her face. She wore a hospital gown printed with little teddy bears, absurdly cheerful against the gravity of the moment. The second thing he noticed was the way she held herself, arms wrapped around her knees, body angled toward the window, ready to retreat further if necessary. Defensive posture, protective. He'd seen it in combat, in prison, in abused animals. The stance of someone who'd learned that the world wasn't safe. The third thing he noticed, the thing that nearly knocked the breath from his lungs, was that she looked nothing like Kelly. Different face shape, different coloring, different everything. And somehow that made it worse, because it meant he wasn't doing this out of confused grief or misplaced substitution. He was doing this because Harper Mitchell was her own person, deserving of protection in her own right. "Harper," Patterson said gently, "this is Mr. Morrison. He's offered to help with your medical bills." Harper looked at Jack for a long moment, taking in the leather jacket, the grey beard, the scars. Her expression didn't change. No fear, no hope, just a kind of numb assessment. She'd probably heard adults making promises before, probably learned not to believe them. "Why?" she asked. Simple question, impossible answer. Jack Morrison had talked his way out of bar fights and into business deals. He'd negotiated with cops, lawyers, rival clubs, and his own demons. But standing in this hospital room, looking at this 8-year-old girl who'd just heard her stepmother abandon her, he couldn't find clever words or easy explanations. So he went with the truth. "Because when I was about your age, I needed someone to step up for me, and mostly nobody did. Figured I'd be the person for you that I wish I'd had for me." Harper's eyes searched his face. "Are you a good person or a bad person?" Jack almost smiled. "That's the right question to ask. Honest answer? I've been both. Done things I'm proud of and things I'm not, but I'm trying to land on the good side before my time's up. Are you going to adopt me? I don't know yet. That's complicated. But I can make sure you're safe and taken care of while we figure things out. That's what I can promise right now. Diane said I cost too much." The words were flat, matter-of-fact, like she was reporting the weather. But Jack heard the hurt underneath, the internalized belief that she was a burden, a problem, an expense rather than a person. "Diane was wrong," Jack said firmly. "You don't cost too much. She just didn't have enough to give. There's a difference." Harper looked down at her hands, small fingers picking at the hospital blanket. "My dad would have paid it. If he was here." "Tell me about your dad." She was quiet for so long, Jack thought she might not answer. Then, still not looking up, he worked at the Ford plant. He could fix anything: cars, washing machines, my bike when the chain came off. He made pancakes on Saturdays shaped like Mickey Mouse ears. He read to me every night, even when he was tired from work. Her voice cracked slightly. He called me his Harper bug. Jack felt something twist in his chest. Sounds like a good man. He was. Now she did look up, and there were tears in her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. He had a heart attack in our garage. I found him. I tried to help, but I didn't know how. The 911 lady told me what to do, but it didn't work. He died anyway. That wasn't your fault. I know. But the way she said it suggested she didn't really believe it, not deep down. Diane said he shouldn't have married her. She said she wasn't ready to be a mom. I told her she didn't have to be my mom, just be nice to me. But she wasn't even that. Patterson shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. Jack ignored him, keeping his focus on Harper. What do you want, Harper? If you could decide what happens next, what would you choose? She thought about it. I want my dad back. Can't give you that. Wish I could. What else? I want... She hesitated. Then the words came out in a rush. I want somebody who doesn't think I'm too much trouble. Somebody who wants me around. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Jack Morrison had made a lot of decisions in his 62 years, some instantly, in the heat of combat or conflict, some slowly, after long deliberation and calculation. This decision fell somewhere in between, quick enough to feel like instinct, slow enough to feel like choice. I'll make you a deal, he said, pulling the room's single chair closer to the bed and sitting down so they were at eye level. I'll pay your hospital bill. All of it. And I'll make sure you don't go into the system, at least not the bad parts of it. I got friends, resources, ways to make things happen. But here's what I need from you. I need you to trust me enough to let me help. Can you do that? I don't know you. No, you don't. So ask me questions, whatever you want to know. Harper studied him for a long moment. Then, are you really in a gang? Motorcycle club, there's a difference. We ride together, look out for each other, help people when we can. Yeah, some members have done bad things, and yeah, cops don't like us much. But my chapter? We're more about brotherhood than crime. Do you have kids? The question hit harder than expected. Jack's jaw tightened. Had a daughter, Kelly. She died 8 years ago, car accident. I'm sorry. Me too. Is that why you want to help me? Because I remind you of her? Sharp kid. No. You don't look like her, don't act like her. This isn't about replacing what I lost. It's about... He paused, trying to find the right words. It's about making sure the world's a little less cruel than it was yesterday. My daughter deserved better than dying at 23. You deserve better than being abandoned at 8. Can't fix what happened to Kelly. Maybe I can fix what's happening to you. Harper nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'll trust you. For now. Until you give me a reason not to. Jack extended his hand. Deal. She looked at his hand, scarred, weathered, rough from decades of mechanical work and harder living, then reached out and shook it. Her hand was tiny in his, delicate as a bird's wing, but her grip was firm. Deal, she said. Patterson cleared his throat. Mr. Morrison, I think we should let Harper rest now. If you're still committed to handling the financial arrangements, I am. Jack stood, but didn't immediately leave. He looked at Harper. I'm going downstairs to take care of the money part. Then I'm going to make some phone calls, talk to some people, figure out the legal stuff. You won't be alone in this, Harper. That's my promise. What if Diane comes back? She won't, and if she does, she'll have to go through me first. He said it with such certainty, such finality, that Harper actually relaxed slightly. You get some rest. I'll be back up before I leave tonight. He walked to the doorway, then paused. Without turning around, Harper, What your dad called you, Harper Bug. That's a good nickname. Shows he loved you specific, not just general. Hold on to that. He didn't wait for her response, just continued into the hallway with Patterson following. Once they were far enough from the room, Patterson stopped him. Mr. Morrison, I have to say, what you're doing is extraordinary, but I need to manage your expectations. The foster care system, the court procedures, the bureaucracy, it's going to be an uphill battle. Even with the best intentions and unlimited resources, there's no guarantee. I don't need guarantees, Jack interrupted. I need action items. You said there were steps I could take. What are they, specifically? Patterson pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. First, you'd need to become a licensed foster parent in Illinois. That requires background checks, home studies, training classes, usually about 30 hours of coursework on child development, trauma, safety protocols. The process typically takes 3 to 6 months. Can it be expedited? Sometimes, if there's an emergency placement need, given Harper's circumstances, possibly. Next step, file a petition for guardianship in the Cook County Circuit Court. You'd need to demonstrate that you can provide a stable, safe environment. Your business ownership and financial resources help, but the criminal record could be a complication. It's from 1978, assault charge, served 18 months, been clean ever since. That matter. It shouldn't disqualify you, but it'll require explanation. You'll need character references, proof of rehabilitation, possibly a home inspection. I own a house in Bridgeport, 3 bedrooms, paid off. Been living there 27 years. Clean, maintained, safe neighborhood. That's good. You'd also need to show community connections, employment stability, possibly undergo a psychological evaluation. Jack nodded, processing. What else? Harper would need therapy. She's experienced significant trauma, losing her father, stepmother's rejection, medical crisis. Any placement situation would require addressing her psychological needs. I'll handle it. What about school? She's enrolled at... Let me check. Patterson scrolled through something on his phone. Shields Elementary, 3rd grade. She's been out for 2 weeks. There'll be work to make up. Can you get me the school's contact information? I can have it sent to your phone. They reached the elevator. Jack pressed the button, then looked at Patterson. You think I'm crazy? I think you're either the best thing that could have happened to that child, or you're setting yourself up for heartbreak when the system doesn't cooperate. Which do you think it'll be? Patterson considered. I think you're going to fight like hell, and that might be enough. But Mr. Morrison, don't make promises to Harper that you can't keep. She's already been abandoned once this week. She can't handle it again. I don't make promises I can't keep, Jack said as the elevator arrived. Never have. They rode down in silence. When the doors opened on the main floor, Preacher was waiting in the lobby with a large black duffel bag. He saw Jack and raised it slightly. Tony sends his regards, Preacher said. Also his concern about your sanity. Yeah, well, sanity's overrated. Jack took the bag, feeling its considerable weight. 47,000 in cash, mostly hundreds and fifties, bundled and counted. Patterson, lead us to wherever you need us. They processed the payment in Patterson's office. It took 2 hours. Forms in triplicate, verification procedures, documentation for the IRS, receipts and records and signatures. Jack Morrison paid it all in cash, watching Patterson and a hospital security officer count every bill twice, watching them run the serial numbers through some database to verify they weren't counterfeit or stolen. When it was done, Patterson handed him a receipt stamped paid in full. Harper Mitchell's account is cleared, Patterson said. Medically, she can be discharged tomorrow if the doctors clear her. Legally, he trailed off. Legally, she's about to become a ward of the state, Jack finished, unless I move fast. You'll need a lawyer, a good one who specializes in family law and foster care. Jack pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts. Got one. Linda Ramirez, help me with my business licenses, knows the system. I'll call her tonight." Patterson stood and extended his hand. "Mr. Morrison, I've worked in hospital administration for 23 years. I've seen families torn apart by medical debt, seen people walk away from loved ones over money, seen more cruelty than I care to remember. What you did tonight," he shook his head, "I don't know if it'll work out the way you hope, but it was the right thing to do." Jack shook his hand. "I hope you're right." They left the office. It was nearly 9 p.m. now, and the hospital had that nighttime quality. Quieter, dimmer, the emergencies of the day settling into the long watches of the night. Jack and Preacher took the elevator back up to the 3rd floor. "You really doing this?" Preacher asked. "Yeah. The whole club's gonna think you lost your mind." They'd be right.